Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the AI Med Amplified podcast, where we talk about healthcare and how it meets innovation. Now, each month, we're going to be speaking with a new researcher about how their work bridges the fields of AI, machine learning, and medicine. Whether you're a tech enthusiast interested in pursuing a career in healthcare, or simply curious about the evolving landscape of medicine, we have something for you. Now, we are your hosts, Jeffrey I.
And I should be Bonnie.
And joining us today is Lena Podina, a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo. Lena, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Would you mind giving a brief introduction about yourself before we begin?
Sure, yeah. I'm Lena. I'm a PhD student in computer science. I um, I did my bachelor's in computer science at the University of Waterloo, and then I actually started off doing a master's here, like in September 21. Um, and I transferred over to PhD because I thought it'd be nice to sort of explore a few more projects, sort of get a bit more experience under my belt, and then potentially get like a more sort of research position eventually when I go into industry. So I'm working on um, the basically applications of machine learning in different biological areas. So basically, machine learning for biological applications. And I have like a few different projects which we can talk about shortly.
Yeah, so thanks for answering, Lena, about your background. Could you tell us how you became interested in that area of your research?
Um, so essentially, let me just look at my notes real quick. Okay. Um, Basically, I wanted to, let me put it this way. I started off having an interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what kind of interested me mostly was not as such the theoretical aspect, like a lot of research these days in AI and machine learning is very theoretical, and it's um, for example, different guarantees, sort of more sort of theoretical properties of neural networks. But I wanted to apply neural networks and machine learning to real world problems. And sort of my work in undergrad, my research experiences in undergrad were more so in education, in
Mm,
quadcopter collision avoidance algorithms, and I think eventually I sort of narrowed down on like biology because I think biology is really cool. Like there's a lot of really cool biological problems that you can solve, and also because it's often very like a very concrete real world problem, and especially if it has to do with medical sort of medicine in general, then it's going to have like a real world impact on like a person potentially, right? Which I think is really cool. So it's sort of this double kind of interdisciplinary real world application, and then also kind of good and sort of for social good, kind of in this definite good impact area, rather than something that where potentially the impact isn't something you can kind of understand or feel.
yeah, I can tell you're so passionate about your research, and I love how you had such a unique shift from like computer science to a biological aspect of it, and I think that's so cool.
Me too. That's awesome. All right. We know that you're working on kind of two like primary projects right now. Would you mind telling us a bit about both of those?
Yeah. So um, there is also a third one.
Mm.
Um, okay, so the two that okay, so the chemotherapy and the language models. Okay, so for those ones, um, yeah, so they're pretty different. I would say the chemotherapy one, the idea is to use is to use something called physics informed neural networks. And in fact, a paper that me and my co author published this past year, we essentially extended physics informed neural networks to be able to not only fit parameters of differential equations, so unknown parameters, if you have like a differential equation and there's certain sort of constants or parameters you don't know, we've extended that to be able to learn entire functions of differential equations. So kind of the like a simple sort of and maybe use case or example is when you have a process, and maybe this is a bit of an abstract example, but I'll get into my project in a second. So let's say you have a process that you think is governed by a specific differential equation, and you have the form of the differential equation, but potentially there are parameters that you don't know, right? So you have data from the differential equation, like you have samples of the solution. But there are certain constants within the differential equation that you don't know, and you're trying to fit those. So physics informed neural networks, which is an influential paper from 2019, they're able to do that using neural networks. So that's already pretty cool. Fitting parameters, great. So we're interested to fit entire functions. So let's say if you have a differential equation and then there's a function of one of the variables that you don't know, and you're not really sure how to model that component of the differential equation. You're not really sure what should go there. So if you have data from the differential equation, potentially you can use our extension and our method to fit this function. So that's a lot of preliminaries for what I'm trying to do. What I'm basically trying to do is chemotherapeutics. They affect cells in different ways. So this depends on the drug. It depends on the number of cells. But essentially, if you're trying to model how a chemotherapeutic affects cells, how it kills them, at what rate it kills them, um, you need to have this term in the differential equation a lot of the time, which is the drug action. And this term is sort of traditionally, it's been conventionally just sort of assumed. So it could be a linear term, it could be a quadratic term, it could be something that sort of kind of starts off linear and then sort of plateaus. But what we're trying to do is learn that from data. So let's say we have some chemotherapeutic, and we know, okay, in general, sort of the growth kind of goes like this, and then there's a function here, which is going to be used to model the death of the cells as a result of the chemotherapy. So what should that function be, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do. So so essentially try to model that function using a neural network. So that was about the chemotherapy project. Should I talk about the other one as well here?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead. Yeah.
Awesome. So that was that one. The other one, this actually started off as a collaboration with a company where they were interested to know where the COVID spike proteins. This is a protein which is it's the protein that codes for that spike in the coronavirus, like when you have a picture of the coronavirus, and so that particular protein, when it's folded, it looks like a spike, but otherwise it's a sequence of amino acids. And they were interested to know in which sections of this protein is the spike more likely to mutate, and where is it more likely to stay conserved. So the reason they wanted that was because they were developing a drug, an antiviral, which they'd like to target a certain part of the spike protein. And if possible, it would be great if this part of the spike protein didn't mutate, because in that case, the antiviral can stay effective for longer. So that's essentially what they wanted. They were interested in where the COVID spike protein tends to mutate and which sort of parts tend to stay conserved. So the approach that we took was essentially to fine tune a large language model on the COVID, on lots of sequences of the COVID spike protein. So I think people often think large language models are, I don't know. I mean, ChatGPT is a large language model, of course.
Mhm.
Um, but here, this is a little bit different. This is a large language model which has been trained on protein sequences. So protein sequences are basically sets. They're basically strings of letters, one letter for each amino acid, and and there's about 20 of them, depending on how you count them. And essentially, instead of words, we now have these amino acids, which are letters, and instead of a sentence, we have a protein. So the idea is there's been a recent work which trained a language model on lots and lots, like millions of these of these protein sequences, right? So what we did was we took one which had already been trained on lots of different protein sequences and fine-tuned it on COVID, on COVID spike sequences in particular. Um, and then after that, hopefully, we're thinking, okay, so it should be able to learn the statistical patterns of mutation in COVID, and then also use all of this information that it knows about lots of other different sequences that it's seen, so different proteins it's seen, which are not COVID, and be able to put that information together and then get a mutational probability at the end of it for every position. So that's the idea here. Yeah.
Wow, that seems real. That seems like a lot, Lena. I can't even believe you're going through that. But from what you've been saying, it seems like there is so much that comes with research. And I just want to ask you a little bit less about your research and maybe more about you. How do you stay motivated throughout this huge, like, and lengthy process? Like, what keeps you going throughout the setbacks, or just what keeps you going in general?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I think everyone will have a different answer to that, to be
Yeah.
honest. Um, I think, like, honestly, sometimes you do have setbacks and you do get demotivated. I mean, I think that's just the reality. I think
Hmm.
I think research is really like it's the it's the long game, really. I think even if you're doing a summer sort of internship, maybe even if um, in that case maybe you only see like a little portion of a project, but if you see one project through to completion, a lot of the time it can take a year or potentially longer to really finish. So I think um, kind of understanding that things not going according to plan, things maybe unexpected results, unexpected things that come up. That's kind of just a part of research, and
Hmm.
I don't think, and sort of a lot of it, I think, is managing expectations in some way because when you're doing an assignment, you kind of know that there's a right answer. you know that someone can help you through it. You know that if well, hopefully someone can help you through it. Hopefully, you can get it done before the deadline if you kind of know, if you paid attention in class, if you understood everything in class, right? Here, you're doing something no one's done before. So I think managing the expectation that that research should go at a specific pace, I think is already pretty helpful. And I think sort of in on the day to day kind of um, in terms of like what personally helps me. Sorry, I'm coughing a lot.
No worries at all.
Take your
Okay,
time, no worries.
so what personally kind of helps me, kind of on like a grad student sort of day to day basis, is like firstly supervisor meetings. Having regular meetings with your supervisor is super helpful because you can really kind of it's like a weekly sort of sort of I wouldn't call it a milestone necessarily, but it sort of keeps you on track, right? You get some feedback about what you've done, you figure out what you want to do for the next week. So it kind of I end up sort of thinking of my time in terms of weeks, in terms of like the weeks
Yeah.
between my supervisor meetings. And then that really helps, because then I think about, okay, what am I going to get done this week? What do I want to get done for next week? What do I want to say for the next week? And I think that's definitely still kind of easier said than done when you're really busy with other things like TAing and courses. But I still think it really helps. Um, Another thing that helps is sort of kind of treating it as a job. You know, it's if you're
Yeah.
doing research, it's really maybe it's not a 9 to 5 job, unless you like really try to make it a 9 to 5 job. But kind of saying, okay, it maybe I didn't get good results, but I put in the time, I learned something, um, and I got something out of it. I got a result out of it. Maybe it's not a great result, but it's a result. It helped me learn about my problem. So as long as I sort of put in the time, kind of get learn, I learn what I'm supposed to, kind of move forward in the project. That's definitely kind of time well spent.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think Jeffrey and I and like any other listeners can definitely relate to this on a smaller scale level with just like our daily assignments. But you provided a lot of great tips, which I might even use. So thank you
Awesome.
so much
Great to
for
hear.
sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes it sound so exciting. And obviously, Aisha and I have a lot of respect for you, for going through the process
Hmm.
and really making sure you stay down to the nitty gritty, right, when getting these results. So, obviously, you have a lot of experience with undergrad research and now with your postgrad as well. What advice would you give to maybe aspiring students or researchers who maybe you're trying to find research for the first time or possibly even consider pursuing a career in research?
I would say, okay, so I think there's, for people who want to start this for the first time, I think there's like probably two sets of people that, probably two sets of people, or two sets of advice even, that I could give here. Like one of them is what if you've never done research? How do you get involved, right? And then the other things are like sort of maybe, you've gotten involved in research. How do you make the most out of it? I think, um, in terms of how do you make the most out of it, I've already said quite a few things that I think are fairly applicable there. Um, Also, um, I think don't be afraid to work on different projects to kind of maybe, if a project isn't working for you, you can try a different one, right? I think being able to sort of dip your toes into different things if possible, I think is really helpful. And especially, like, let's say you've gotten one research position, right? And it turns out it's not really your cup of tea, right? That will help you get a next one. If you're interested in something else and you want to try it out, hey, I've got this experience. So you already sort of, you already look better than someone who has nothing at all, right? So in that sense, trying something out, and I think switching projects might seem difficult, or maybe it seems like it seems easy to fall into like a sunk cost fallacy. But I think a lot of the time, you might even have learned something from there, and then your experience will definitely carry over. You might be able to get a new project, having had that experience already. For people who haven't, for people who haven't really had any research experience at all, I would say, I email people, ask ask people, people, mostly professors, um, ask them to talk about the research, ask them if they have open positions. Um, Lots of professors, I think, are quite busy. However, they might have grad students who are willing to mentor an undergrad. I'm mentoring one undergraduate student and one sort of research assistant who's not an undergraduate. Yeah, and it's great. And I think a lot of grad students might be willing to take on sort of mentoring an undergraduate student. So even if a certain professor doesn't have space in their lab for you having your own project, like a grad student might. So yeah.
That sounds good, Lena. Yeah,
Yeah.
so your entire like research project seems like you need a lot of skills and just a lot of time. And if I were in your position, I would need like an extra boost or just something to help me. So I'm gonna ask you, if you could choose a superpower to help you in your research, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I spent some time thinking about this question.
We did too.
It's hard to say. Honestly, it's hard to say because I think, like, the thing is, I might have liked to wish for like more. Okay, more ideas is actually a pretty good one, but better ideas, it's like, you know, I think coming up with ideas, kind of a lot of this research process, reading papers, I think isn't necessarily something I want to like outsource to a
Hmm.
superpower. I think it's pretty fun.
Right.
Maybe coming up with more ideas. That'd be nice. If I could just come
Like,
up with more,
yeah.
maybe better ideas. Um, you know, um, yeah, I a lot of, I think general sort of maybe even just um, you know, be great if I could write bug-free code the first time. Something like that would be real nice. Um, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of superpowers that I might wish for are also things that I can sort of work on and even getting more better ideas. I think reading papers. I think that that's also something that you can train, and it's not necessarily like an unattainable superpower either. So um, I think thinking about what I wanted, what kind of superpower I'd like, I think is kind of helpful, but I think it doesn't have to remain a superpower. I think if you sort of work on it, if you try to keep that in mind as you do research, it's potentially possible to improve.
Yeah, I love that response. It's so like motivating because you're basically
Me
saying
too.
that it doesn't have to be something that we can't attain. It could be something that we just work on. So yeah,
Mhm.
thank you so much. Um, Lena, once again, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us and educating us and our listeners on your projects, your journey, and like your field of research. And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening. We hope you're able to gain some valuable knowledge. And don't forget to follow our Instagram at AIMed McMaster. This is Aisha Biabani,
And Jeffrey, I.
and we'll see you again next month on AI Med Amplified.
Awesome.